Hey guys, what's up? Um, Sorry that this is an audio recording, but my camera's downstairs, and I didn't feel like going downstairs and dragging the thing up and trying to get it to work on my laptop again. So you're gonna have to put up with an audio recording. Sorry about that. I'll try not to let this happen with the next vid. Anyway, as I'm sure some of you already know, I've been paying attention to this race and IQ debate that's been going on YouTube for the past couple of days. And I have to say it's been very, very interesting, not to mention rather entertaining. There's been some really interesting things being said on both sides, and I've actually been enjoying it because, it's always good to see, people try to convince others with what they consider to be factual information. It's an educational experience. I don't think it's too much of a stretch of an imagination to figure out which side I am going with, especially if you happen to look at my likes lately, the videos I've been liking. But I will contend that the major reason why I'm going with them is because so far they've been the ones with the most convincing argument. When you have people actually studying this stuff, arguing their point, you can't help but go with the experts on this. That's important. More on that later. I personally have decided to kind of bow out on this. I'm not jumping in and, throwing my 2 cents in here and trying to argue data and genetics and all that. The reason why is because one, more qualified people are doing this, and two, I'm not a qualified person. I don't study biology. I am not an anthropologist or geneticist. I didn't take this up in college, so all I'd be doing really is reading other reports and other scientific data and other scientific consensus and then quoting from there. And while I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that, I mean, if you're doing your research correctly, there's nothing wrong to doing that. And there's already several people on YouTube doing a fine job of it. So me doing that, I personally think that me doing that is going to just be a waste of time. I'd just be regurgitating the same things that other people are saying. I know that I did touch on race and IQ in an earlier video, but that was only because I was using that as an example to prove a point about cultural bias. Pointing at cultural biases and how they influence us today was more the point of the video, and not on whether race realism is correct or not. So, yeah. But if you guys want to watch that one, go ahead. Now, having said all this, there is something that I do want to point out, and it's something that I've noticed about this debate as it's been raging on, and it's that we've been here before. The way this argument is played out, I've seen this happen. I'm getting that feeling of, I've seen this already. Not the arguing of the topic itself, though I have seen that already on YouTube in a smaller scale and like usually in comment sections and stuff like that. It's not the topic that I'm talking about when I say I've seen this before. It's the way that this argument is being waged. Simply put, this is reminding me of the whole creationist versus evolution thing. Yeah, creationism versus evolution. This is going the exact same way. The only difference is the people who are arguing. And that's actually the funny part about this, because some of the people who are arguing against creationists are now arguing against other atheists on this whole race realism thing, and they're playing the part of the creationists. I know I'm not the only person to see this. It's not like I'm some super duper genius who can point out things that other human beings don't notice. But just in case the person listening to this hasn't noticed this correlation, who hasn't noticed the similarity, or if you did notice the similarity and you were just wondering if anyone else was going to bring it up, well, let me explain. Let me show what I'm talking about. Let's start by making a comparison of the two. In fact, that's what I'm mostly going to do. I'm just going to make a comparison between the two arguments. With the whole creationism versus evolution debate, you had a group of people, the creationists, who had a archaic worldview. They believed that the world was created by some divine outside source, so-called an intelligent designer, if you will, who created the world in 7 days, and and it's all documented in the Bible, and everything that's in the Bible can be proven scientifically. And these creationists had certain champions, certain people who called themselves, knowledgeable experts in science, who would try to argue their archaic views through a scientific standpoint, pointing at certain scientific principles and certain aspects in nature and trying to show that these things prove that their Bible is correct and that there really is a God who created everything. And this all stemmed again from an archaic worldview of a God that created the world. And everything is supposedly in the Bible and is all provable. Now, on the other side, you had scientists who were looking at these creationists are going, no, you're wrong. Not only are you wrong, but you don't even know about, you really are showing that you don't know anything about science at all with the way that you think that your explanations actually make sense and actually prove your point. You don't understand what evolution is, you don't understand the facts that have been presented, and you're misinterpreting the data that's out there just to try to satisfy your belief systems. You don't even know how the scientific principle works. You can't, have a belief system in the beginning and then try to force the facts to make your belief system factual. You have to first interpret the data and then come to conclusions afterwards. I mean, all these scientists are saying this. And most of the people who were those who were considered by the believers of creationism, like, these are our experts, most of them had no real backgrounds in science. And the few that did were questionable at best. And even if they had, a full stand, they were like straight up scientists, most of the scientific community rejected them because their particular findings did not match up with the majority of the consensus out there, nor were they able to come up with anything repeatable. So they were rejected by the vast majority of experts out there. Now, on YouTube, you had people quoting from these sources. On the creationist side, just about no one on the creationist side on YouTube who were arguing for the creationists had a real background in science. So what they were doing was just quoting from their champions, like, Kent Hovind, for instance, and saying that, this guy's correct. And then meanwhile, you had other atheists quoting from scientists and from the scientific documentation out there saying that this stuff proves that you're wrong. But at the same time, you also had actual scientists on YouTube saying that, look, this proves you're wrong, which lended more weight to the atheists when they were saying that creationism is bullshit. You with me so far? Now let's go with this current race and IQ debate going on. There are some people out there who call themselves race realists. And they also hold to an archaic worldview that there is a hierarchy among races. And this is archaic because this can even be linked back to certain religious beliefs that there were certain chosen people who God said that, you're my chosen people, you're the ones who inherit the earth, and all these other people, you can do whatever the fuck you want to them because they're not righteous, they're not believers. You can enslave them or take their lands or kill them off, whatever. This was used as justification for many atrocities committed over history and, people taking over people's lands and crusades and all that. But then later on, when religion started fading away in light of the Enlightenment age in Europe and people trying to lean more toward reason and logic, people still wanted to take other people's lands and their resources, and so they had to come up with a different excuse as to why they were allowed to do this. And that's when this whole thing about, some races are just better than others started coming over, and they tried to prove this through science. Now, many of these race realists, the modern day ones, they are trying to use scientific data to prove their particular beliefs. And they're saying that they have certain champions that they went to say, look, these guys prove that they're using science and they're showing studies and they've polled, they've done tests which show that our view is correct, that there is a link between race and IQ and genetics, and that there is obviously some races who are more intelligent or more superior than others. And on the other side of the argument, you have, again, the majority of the scientific community going, no, that's not what the data is saying. You've misinterpreted it, or you have no idea how genetics and science work. You don't really understand how biology works. You've completely misconstrued the facts, or you're just simply completely ignorant of how science works. This doesn't, I'm sorry, this doesn't, hold muster. You're wrong. And once again on YouTube, the people debating this, the ones on the race realism side, Most of them don't have a background in genetics or in biology or in archaeology. They're simply quoting from the people they're believing in and saying that this information that they came out with is factual. And then you have other people arguing on the other side who are quoting from the majority of the scientific community. But once again, you have actual biologists or actual archaeologists, or at least people who studied this stuff and are furthering their studies in this stuff, getting degrees in this, also coming out and saying, no, the data does not say what you're saying, you're wrong, lending more weight to the argument against racial hierarchies and links between race and IQs and real differences between the races and whatnot. Now, I'm pretty sure you guys get the point. We're looking at pretty much two different arguments are being argued the exact same way. The only difference is with the former argument, it was atheists versus creationists, or rather, atheists versus religious people. Now it's atheists versus atheists for the most part. The only difference is the atheists who on the race realism side are acting like the religious people. In other words, they're holding on to an archaic worldview that they do not want to give up. They have a certain belief that they want to mold the scientific facts to. And despite the fact that the majority of the scientific community is saying you're wrong, they're saying, no, we're the ones who are right, because they have a belief that they don't want to let go of. And I find this rather laughable, because this makes them hypocrites. Many of these people were the same ones lambasting creationists for doing the exact same thing. The creationists were basically saying, we're correct, our Bible and our beliefs are correct, it's the scientific community that's wrong. In fact, there's a conspiracy to keep our ideas down. You don't want the truth to come out, despite the fact that the scientists are saying, can you please come up with any real data to prove your point? That isn't stuff that we've already disproven. And now it's the same thing on this race argument side. You now have other atheists going, no, our stuff is true. It's just that there's some conspiracy to keep the truth from coming out because of liberal bias and other shit like that. And the scientific community is saying the same thing that they said with the creationists. Look, no one is suppressing you. Can you please come out with any real data so that we can peer review it and make sure it's not stuff that we've already disproven before? It's the same damn thing. The only difference are the people arguing here. I find this hilarious. You want another similarity? Very far to the right groups, like certain groups who finance the creationist side of things, and with this whole race realism thing, you will once again find far right-wing people supporting that as well. Do I need to go on? I'm finding this incredibly laughable. And what really makes this hilarious is that many of the people who are arguing for race realism, who call themselves atheists and claim that they're logical, if this is true, then you people really should know better, because you're making yourselves out to be hypocrites. You can't, on one hand, say that the creationists are wrong for not going with the majority of the scientific consensus. Then when this argument comes up, you refuse to go along with the majority of the scientific consensus. Am I not making any sense here? Does this not compute? You can't on one hand say that the majority is correct because they know what they're talking about, and then on the other hand, the same people who know what they're talking about, no, fuck you, you're just trying to keep the truth from being known. Really? You're gonna delude yourselves that much? It really is laughable. I don't really know what else to say about it. Well, I will say this. I'm not gonna lie and say that I haven't confronted my own biases with this topic. After all, I am of African descent. My parents are Haitian. But I'm also not somebody who's going to reject facts given to me by people who have thoroughly studied this. For instance, I'm male. And since I'm male, one thing that I hear from a lot of feminists is that there's a certain amount of privilege that males get to enjoy in the society that females don't. Now, this is something that I don't like to hear, because it can easily make me out to be some type of evil monster, even though it's not true. But it's something, even though I'm male and I don't like hearing about how women are being subjugated in a male-dominated society, the fact remains that there are plenty of signs pointing to this, and I can't reject that, no matter what I may believe. I have to admit, yeah, from what I've seen, women do get the short end of the stick in many ways. And there's certain things that they have to worry about that I don't since I'm male. So if I can accept that, then I could accept the racial argument if there was actual facts proving the race realist's case. It's just that there isn't. So I can't go along with them. You know, my bias is notwithstanding. So yeah, that's it. I went on this longer than I wanted. I actually wanted to keep this around 10 minutes, but let me end it off here. But I do want to. I want to say this though. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is some type of logical reason why, on one hand, a group of people will say the creationists are stupid for not going with the scientific consensus, but then on the other hand, you'll go against the scientific consensus with your own beliefs. Is there a really logical, rational reason to do this? Is there? I don't see it, but maybe I'm wrong. Atheists pride themselves on being willing to put, their beliefs aside in order to accept the truth. But if you're going to say that and you can't do it yourselves, then you have no business lambasting others for it. So if you were an atheist who were saying to creationists they're stupid for not going on with the scientific majority, and now you're on the side of race realism, you better take a good look in the mirror, because you've just gone against everything that you claim to have stood for. Just saying. Catch you guys later.